Hi, today I'd like to talk to you about a theme involving knight c5 in the King's Indian structures. Recently a friend of mine, probably a 1700 type player, was asking about just some general developing themes in the King's Indian and just some positional themes, and it got me thinking it's something which probably people don't necessarily know about, and it can actually, the same theme can be used in quite a lot of the d4 openings, where if black can try to establish a knight outpost on c5, it can really be a bit of a pest for white. So what I'm going to do is talk about how you can get a knight to c5, and also the other option of getting the knight to f5 in perhaps some other openings, such as more e4 type setups. We'll look at getting a knight to c5, and then just establishing and cementing the knight on c5. And of course it can happen in the King's Indian, it can happen in the Nimzo Indian, and various other type systems. So let's have a look at the board. I won't go through so much opening theory as such, but we'll just look at the idea. So d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, knight f3, castles, bishop e2, e5, and the move here, d5, this is called the Petrosian system. Now, I'm not really going to be discussing the Petrosian system as such, but what I want to establish here, and what I want to really point out, is this square here, c5. This is a very important square for black in any of these type of systems. So it doesn't matter to me whether white castles next, or plays bishop g5, or h3, or any specific move. I'm not going to discuss any more specific moves here. That's for an opening book. If you want to know the specific moves, get an opening book, or look at your database. What I'm looking at here is positional themes. So this c5 square. Now, the way that black will normally secure a knight there is you'll either develop the knight via d7 into c5, or you play a5 and develop the knight via a6 into c5. But this is very, very simplistic stuff. I guess we have the question to be asked is, what does the knight do when it gets there? And more importantly, can the knight stay there? So after you've got your knight into c5, well, I'll start off with if you haven't used a5. If you haven't used a5, you'll need to get a5 in pretty quickly. Now, your knight does attack a pawn here, and so white will end up defending that pawn. That's one of the useful points of having the knight there. But once white's all secure, so whether it be with this move, the queen, a pawn, whatever, you'll need to cement the knight on c5. The way to do that's a5. So you see, if white can play b5, your knight's vacating c5 very quickly. So the way to cement it is with a5. So now b5 is impossible. So what if white is adamant that they want to play b4? In any case, sorry, I said b5 rather than b4. I mean b4. What if white is adamant that they want to play b4 in the first place? Now, and they decide to prepare it with a3, ready to play b4 next move. Simple move here is a4. And now they're never ever getting b4 in, unless of course they can win the a-pawn. But this a-pawn, although it's kind of a long way advanced, it can be protected very easily with bishop d7. Overprotected by the knight, the bishop, and the rook. If they ever want to play b4, well, you simply play the en passant. And although they may get rid of your knight with another knight, they've weakened their pawn structure dramatically. So if you actually swap these here, play b6, and now you've still got a good square for the other knight, so you might want to manoeuvre the other knight in here. You've also got an isolated pawn for white, and you get this sort of thing in the bayonet attack variation quite frequently, although the difference being white will have accelerated this attack very quickly in the bayonet. That said, it's not by any means a forced win or anything like that. Basically, a knight will sit there and stop b4 at all costs. But there's something more to this. If white knows what to do properly, then they can vacate the knight. So b3 followed by a3. Very important to play b3. Now a4 does not work because we push b4. But in this case, sometimes the knight can get into b3 and swap off the good bishop. If white has been really careful, they've played rook b1 and b3, a3, and they've made sure they've covered themselves and they've finally got b3, b4 in. What you can do here, you've got a number of options. You can firstly move the knight back here, although I sort of don't recommend it because while it's good if white does this, you've got a nice square. If white does nothing, your knight really is out of play. Generally a better response is to swap, using your open line for your rook, and now one of two things. One is get the knight into this square, into a4, where you can either swap it off or leave it there to cause a bit of nuisance value. Or you can move back to a6 and put some pressure on this pawn. Either or, both moves are reasonable. In any case, what I like about this theme, the theme of knight c5, is that regardless whether the knight eventually gets evicted or not, it really does hold up white's play. Black will really waste a lot of white's time by forcing white to evict that knight. So a very, very useful plan to know about in the King's Indian. And while you're doing this, and while white's worrying about this, of course you can play your normal King's Indian type moves, such as h6, f5, f4, g5, rook f7, bishop f8, rook g6, g4, queen moves out, etc. While this is all going on. And of course white's going to have to look at this side of the board, and while they're defending this, it's harder for them to continue over here with the knight. So, very useful little setup. Although my friend who I discussed earlier mentioned it in the King's Indian, it's actually also quite relevant in the Bogo Indian. The Bogo Indian being a sort of avoidance of the Nimzo Indian. So d4, knight f6, c4, e6. Of course, after knight c3, you have the Nimzo Indian. And it can be played there too occasionally, but the Bogo Indian knight f3, bishop moves out to b4, bishop d2, queen e7, for example. Now, there's a number of different variations here, but one of the main themes of the Bogo Indian is essentially building a brick wall as such. So you'll often get a situation where you'll play a5, knight c6, bishop will have swapped itself off somehow or another, either for the bishop or the knight, d6 and e5. Now, when in these lines, when white pushes to d5, I might keep the bishop. Oh no, I'll keep the knight. When white pushes to d5, you'll sort of get a structure like this. The move now is knight b8, just simply moving back to b8 and making a switch to a6 and then back into c5. So after knight b8, again you have exactly the same themes. Knight will move here and eventually just move into here. Now, if white has managed to get this in, black simply ignores b4, because after b4 there's not really a lot white can do. If white pushes to b5, black gets exactly what they're after, the big knight in c5, secure it intensely and then start your f5 push. If white takes the pawn, well, it's not really a pawn sacrifice because you're just going to play knight c5 anyway, win the pawn back next move, and white's position's completely weakened their pawn structure. So, very useful to know. On the same note, if you're playing a King's Indian in reverse with the white pieces, so for example, a King's Indian attack or even a reverse Nimzo Indian, so a Nimzo Larsen type thing. So we'll just go through a couple of moves of a King's Indian attack, for example, or a King's Indian reversed, should we say. Knight here, bishop here, e4, d4. Again, you've got the same situation. The knight can sit on c4 and secure itself with a4 and just cement itself there. Or a reverse Nimzo Bogo Indian, Nimzo Larsen attack. Same thing, but with reverse colours. The knight sits on c4. Of course, there's more to the King's Indian and Bogo Indian and Nimzo Indian than sitting a knight on c5. But it's just one more theme that is useful to know about. You won't use it every game, and a lot more times than not you're going to be attacking on the king side, but if you do know about this theme, you can hold up your opponent enough so that your king side attack can push through with a bit more impact. Good luck when you play it next.